So, anybody got any questions? Yes, Martin, would you like me to open your mic? Can you? I've opened your mic, Martin.
Hi, Rachel.
Hello.
Yeah, I've just got a question related to critique tools. I'm not sure if this is the most appropriate time to ask it, but looking at the CAST website, they have obviously critique tools for a whole range of qualitative, quantitative, RCTs and so on. A lot of my literature that I'm looking at is mixed methodologies, quantitative and qualitative. I've been unable to locate like a specific tool to critique it, so I'm just wondering if it's appropriate to put all the literature through, say, two separate critique tools, one qualitative, one quantitative. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does make sense. Sometimes the choice of critical appraisal tool is completely up to you. If you are struggling to find a reasonable tool that's applicable to all of your research, then what I would advise you to do is to go to pretty much any of the research textbooks that are on the reading list, whether it's Parihu, Pollitt and Beck, Pollitt and Hungler. All of those research textbooks have generalized appraisal tools in the back or in the chapter on critical appraisal, and they are very much more generic tools. At undergraduate level, I very much advise people to go to the one at the back of Muhlenheck, which is a very comprehensive tool, but it's quite self-explanatory to use. And I'd have no problem at all with you using that critical appraisal tool for this piece of work. Obviously, the depth of analysis needs to be greater than that from an undergraduate level, but it's an adequate tool to use.
Okay, so you almost like use it as like a basic initial start and then build upon it.
Absolutely, because it's asking you generic questions about your research methods and your research methodology, and you're addressing those questions in much more depth at this level.
Okay.
But it's still a very good structured tool to use.
Okay, that's fantastic. Brilliant.
If you've got research that's quantitative and research that's qualitative, either in the same piece of research, i.e. a mixed methods approach, or you've got some quantitative and some qualitative, it's easier to use a much more generic tool.
Right, yeah. Okay, brilliant. That's lovely. Thanks, Rachel.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to mute you now. It's immense.
Okay, that's fine.
Any other questions? Any questions at all, either around the assignment, the critical appraisal, or obviously around quantitative research methods, which was the sessions that you've got today? No? It's going to be a very short session if you haven't got anything to ask. As I said at the beginning, the module timetable, which is here on the welcome and module information tile. Yes, if you want to email questions later, then that's absolutely fine. No problem with that. If you've got any other questions, I'll talk. I'm just waiting very patiently for this piece of information to open, so I could just... A number of people have emailed around questions around analysis, which is why the session here for today obviously is, the material is up there, and then I was going to do research ethics with Ruth on the 21st. I'm going to swap that, and Rona and I are going to do analysis in a fortnight's time, because people have asked for questions around analysis, and have suggested that it would be appropriate to do that next. Okay, so in terms of, there's a couple of questions around tutorial support. On Tuesday, the 12th of December, Rona and I are both available on webinar to talk about the assignment and to offer some tutorial support, and obviously to encourage you actively to undertake the module evaluation, which is an electronic evaluation. If you can't attend on that Tuesday, I'm very happy to arrange individual tutorials, either by Skype or phone, or it would be slightly more difficult to arrange individual webinars just because of scheduling webinars, but certainly we could do it by Skype or by phone. It is advisable, or certainly easier and more beneficial to you, if when we do have a tutorial, I have got some written material to review. Because if I've got written material to review at the tutorial, then I can physically go through it with you, the section that you've sent, or any specific questions that you've got. So it is absolutely your choice whether you want to schedule something in terms of an individual tutorial. And in that last fortnight, sort of from the 5th and the 25th, the 5th, throughout December is what I'm saying, I'm happy to do any kind of tutorial. No, it is not a group tutorial, and attendance to Plymouth is absolutely not required at all. None of this content on this module is face-to-face. It's not attendance, and I'm sorry if that message was confusing. It's a virtual tutorial, not a physical tutorial. But as I said, I'm very happy to do that via Skype, so that's a little bit easier to have a conversation if you prefer, or we can have a conversation on the phone if you don't want to be available for the webinar, or you can't be available for the webinar on the 12th. So I hope that's clear. It's not a face-to-face tutorial. I'm not expecting you to travel here to Plymouth on the 12th of December. It is a virtual tutorial. So whether it's, we will spend some time, we do have a webinar booked that day. There will be a Q&A, a little bit like this afternoon, for you to ask any questions that you want. But if you would actually feel that your time would be better spent in a one-to-one tutorial on the phone, then I'm very happy to schedule that. And you can either schedule that with me or Rona. We're both available. So that's in terms of tutorial support. Another question. Right, just going through these in order. Claire, do you want, what's your question about the next research module? Hi, Claire.
Hello, all right. Obviously, we haven't finished this one yet, and I've just been advised to sign up to my advanced clinical context module.
All right.
However, I wondered how difficult it would be to do that module, and also the next research module together. They're both in January.
Well, the next research module is in a block. It's not one day a week. It's run over a block of time in April.
Oh, okay.
So it's not spread. It is, I'm just looking at the dates now, it's the 12th and 13th of April, and then the 16th and 17th of April, with tutorials available on the Wednesday. So if the dates don't clash, then that's one issue. If the dates do clash, that can be problematic. In terms of your workload, that's a bit of a difficult question to answer. It is tough to do 2 modules at once, but it is manageable if you're very organised.
Okay. Are these attendance or these webinars for the next research proposal?
Pardon?
Are these attendance days or webinars?
So they're webinars. It's all done distance learning. If we can, we do like to have one workshop day, which will either be on Monday the 16th or Tuesday the 17th. But if you can't physically come to that, people Skype in for that.
Okay.
But we do have a contact day if we can. Last time, a lot of the candidates, the participants, were able to physically come, so we had it physically. The year before, we had 3 in the room and 9 on Skype. So it was interesting, but that's what the technology's there for.
And these 4, are they all day?
Yeah, well, when I say all day, they're usually a 10 till 12 and then a 1 till 3 or 4 o'clock session. So
thank you. I can do both then. That's fine. Thank you.
They're split. Okay. Any other questions?
No, that's great. I think I can do both. I just didn't want to lose the impetus of doing this module and then waiting too long to do the next research one.
Yeah, I mean, the next research one is also run in September, so you could do it then, but then that would stop you going on to do the dissertation if you were doing the dissertation next year.
Yes, yeah, that's fine. I'll carry on. I'll apply for this one. Thank you, Rachel. That's all I need.
Okay, I'm going to mute you now.
Thank you.
Right. Pamela, shall I open your mic? Where have you gone? There you are. Hi, Pamela. What's your question around thematic analysis?
Oh, hi, Rachel. Yes, because I was just reading about the, the previous discussion, previous webinar, and there's a thing about the body should be in a search or in a different theme in research. I'm just wondering what specific theme is this, and like examples of the different themes in research that I can use. Different themes in research, did you say? Yes, yeah, it has been mentioned, like last discussion by Rona, there's on the PowerPoint about the themes in research. Yeah. It should be a thematic approach. So just wondering what this thematic approach is all about. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more in a fortnight about thematic analysis, because that really does fall under the qualitative analysis session. Right. What we mean by thematic analysis. So if I was talking about, which is what I want you to do for your research, is I want you to look at each of the papers that you've read and look for themes. So for example, you know me and my hand washing, I love it as an example. So if you had read a number of studies, 10 studies around hand washing, you might see in their results that they all said facilities was an issue, that actually having the right sinks in the right place with the right hand wash really impacted on hand washing technique. So you would say that infrastructure is one of the themes. Equally, you might see across all of the analysis that education and people knowing about infection control impacted on their ability to hand wash appropriately. And so you might say education is a theme. So that's undertaking a thematic analysis on your research, which is what I want you to do for this assignment. It's a thematic analysis of the findings. Right. You might find, though, you might flip that on its head, and it might be that all of the research is saying the same thing, but actually what you found across the research are methodological themes.
So in interviewing, they've all found certain things. So you might flip it on its head and use it as the methodology as a theme. So you might look at it from that perspective, which is fine. When you are reading research and they have, for example, done a series of interviews, they may talk about them doing thematic analysis on the different themes that have come out of the interviews transcripts. So as you're interviewing people, you might see a repeated sets of phrases or words or ideas coming out of those interviews. So that's thematic analysis on your data. Does that answer your question?
All right. Okay. Somehow it's a bit clearer. Thank you.
But I'll just mute your mic because I'm getting a little bit of back feedback. One of the examples that I've put online, which is a narrative review of the HIV, attitudes to HIV, which was the Pickles article that's on as a PDF in your exemplars. They've undertaken a thematic analysis of the literature, so it's really quite a nice example of a narrative review done on using a thematic analysis approach. So hopefully that answers your question, Pamela. I'll just delete some of these questions as they've come through. Right. Sorry, the dates for research 2, Emma, is that what you're after, the next research module? They are the 12th of April, the 13th of April, the 16th of April, the 17th of April, and then the 18th of April is for tutorials, 2018. Any other questions? Anybody want me to open their mics? Hi, Andrew.
Hi, can you hear me? Sorry, I'm having technical problems.
Oh, right. Yes, no, I can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. I just wanted to check about most of the articles I'm reviewing for my piece of work are predominantly medical.
Yeah.
And would that be an issue at all, or is that okay?
No, it's not an issue at all. Certainly knowing the field from which you're coming from, a lot of the research will be of medical. There won't be as much nursing research as there is medical research, so that's absolutely not an issue at all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I've muted you again, Andrew, sorry, because of static, but one thing I would say that maybe actually in your research question, you might highlight the brevity of nursing research in your particular field, but I'll leave that to you as a comment. Okay, so a couple of people have asked about drafts. Unfortunately, I'm not able to read what I would call a draft, so that means you can send me your whole document, but actually I will only review a section of it. So it might be worth you thinking about which section you're particularly concerned about, whether it's the first theme or, the introduction and the search strategy sections are pretty self-explanatory. There's a set formula that you need to follow. And so it might be worth me reviewing the first theme or the synthesis section and so on. So select which bit you would like me to look at. If you send me the whole document, I'm not able to read 3,000 words 42 times 2, so unfortunately. So I'm very happy to look at a section, but I would quite like you to identify which section you're particularly concerned about. If you want somebody to read the draft for English and for level 7 writing, then as I said at the beginning, your best bet is to go through the Writing Development Service and the Learning Support Services, because writing development, which is through the RAS website, which is on as your additional resources. So I shall just close that document. And in additional resources here, the writing development link, if you go there, they will you're able to send them a draft and they will write you back feedback regarding whether it's at level 7 or not. So they're there to review a whole draft, but I'm very happy to review a section, as is Rona, and it doesn't matter which one of us you go to for support. I'm happy for either of us are happy to look at sections, but not whole drafts. And as I stated last time, I've put an example of a submission front sheet there underneath the tent, and there's the literature summary form, which can be useful for your appendices, but it's not, you don't have to do it, but it is useful. I'm happy to look at any section or draft up to a week before submission. So the submission date is, I'm just checking my diary so I don't misquote myself. The submission date is Monday the 29th. So I won't look at anything after the 22nd of January. If you send it to me at 6 o'clock on the 19th, i.e. the Friday before, I'm not sure what level of feedback I'll be able to give. So maybe earlier that week. So maybe aim to send me something at the beginning of the week of the 15th at the latest, and then you'll be sure of some substantial feedback. Any other questions? Put your hands up and I can open your mics if there's anything you'd like to ask. Nobody's got any additional questions for me around quantitative research? So in terms of the mix of qualitative and quantitative, it's very much going to be influenced by the subject area that you've chosen. I'm happy for you to use all qualitative if that's all the research that you've found. It might then, you might articulate in your general appraisal section that there is a lack of quantitative research in this particular subject area. In this particular you might also focus on qualitative research, but say the quantitative research has addressed certain issues and therefore you're going in a different direction. So as long as there's some explanatory discussion about why you've chosen all qualitative research rather than a mix, at this stage, I would expect you to certainly have looked at some quantitative research, but there may not be any quality quantitative research in your particular subject area. Equally, there might not be any quality qualitative research in your particular chosen subject area. So, you know, there will need to be some sort of explanatory discussion. But you won't be marked down if you haven't used both theoretical paradigms. It's your ability to critique the literature that you've chosen that we're marking, and why you've chosen those papers is also something we are assessing. So as long as you've given us an appropriate rationale for your choice of topic and an appropriate rationale for why you've chosen the relevant literature, either is fine. Oh, that's a difficult question to answer, actually. No, is the answer to that, Martin, I'm afraid. Wouldn't it be nice if it was all that, if it was that clear cut? If you remember, we had a conversation, we certainly had a discussion in the first session about ontology and epistemology. If the research question that's being asked and the topic that's been chosen, and the researcher is taking a specific perspective, that's what makes it qualitative or quantitative, interpretive or positivist. So you might have a qualitative question, and you might have a interpretive perspective with some numbers, statistical analysis in it. So it isn't that simplistic to say if it's got statistical analysis and it's got numbers, then it's quantitative. You need to review it in a little bit more depth. It would suggest, however, if there is statistical analysis, that the paper is quantitative. But you can't say that categorically. So research that I was looking at recently looked at, it was looking at student experiences of placement as an example. It's very much a qualitative study, very much an interpretive perspective, but one of the initial pieces of information was a statistical analysis of student satisfaction on placements. So they'd done a probability calculation using some simple descriptive statistics, so percentages and means and medians and modes and things like that, to explain and contextualize the people that they were looking at. And then they purposefully selected students who'd had excellent experiences and students who'd had extremely poor experiences, and they interviewed them, and it was that discussion that was very much the bulk of the research. But if you had picked it up and read it initially, you would have seen these sort of initial descriptive statistics, which were very much about explanatory context that allowed you to understand how sampling had taken place, for example. So hopefully that example makes it a little bit clearer. So just to recap, everybody's happy with the quantitative research sessions. They've had a look at them, and maybe some people have asked for a little bit more time to digest them, and they might be sending me questions later. That's absolutely fine. I'll hope to address all of those questions. Has anybody got any assignment questions that they'd like to ask? Well, a simple answer to that question, Kieran, is yes, you should be making some statement about if a lot of the research is finding similar or the same confounding variables, what is it about those variables that is problematic to the research? And if they are all coming up with the same confounding variables, why are they significant? So what are you going to tell me about these particular variables in these quantitative studies? Because if you're talking about confounding variables, then you will be talking about quantitative pieces of work, because we don't talk about confounding variables in qualitative research. So in this quantitative research, especially, and this is sort of an area of critique, is if they're all talking about the same confounding variables and they're stating that they're doing a randomized control trial, you could be quite critical of their study design. So it might be a flaw in their study design that's actually an issue here rather than anything else. So yes, I would expect you to discuss why they are significant. Hope that answers the question. You are talking a little bit about clinical reasons in your rationale, but yes, in the body of the discussion, the thematic analysis, you are critiquing the methodology, because you're trying to develop a critical understanding of the research itself, and that's where the clinical the clinical emphasis comes in, and its methodology. So you are focusing much more on the methodology rather than the clinical problem. Statistics and probability calculations. Well, Bridie's session does do a little bit about telling you, and Jenny's session does do a little bit more about explaining, hopefully, statistics and probabilities. When you're critiquing statistical analysis, one of the key things that you need to evaluate is, firstly, is it understandable? So when they are presenting these figures to you, are you able to look at the presentation of the figures and say, I might not understand the test and the finer details of descriptive or inferential statistics. It's not necessary for you to go into depth about why a chi-square test was used or a t-test or whatever. But when you look at the material that's being presented to you, do you understand it? Is it clear where these numbers have come from? And in the discussion that they then present to you, is it adequately discussed? Because you're critiquing the research, not the statistical test itself. So when you are reading the discussion around the presentation of statistics, does it make sense? Can you map those statistics back? So if it said that the probability of something was this, is it clear what that means? Is it clear how that addresses the research question or research aims? So it's not about delving into the minutiae of statistical analysis itself. It's looking at the research overall. I don't need you to be statistical experts, but if there are certain tests that are predominantly being used in the research that you're reading, it might be worth just investigating a little bit around what those statistical tests are and how they are used to interpret numerical information. Okay. Any other questions, assignment questions or general questions? Okay, so if you've got no other questions, then I'll say thank you very much for your attention this afternoon. The material is up there. Obviously, it's not going anywhere, so please, engage with it. And if there's any additional information that you require or any other information that you would like, then please let me know. The session on the 21st of November is going to be on data analysis, predominantly focusing, although there's a session already there from Bridie, focusing on quantitative. Rona and I will do a little recap, but we will be focusing on qualitative analysis on the 21st. That webinar will start as normal at 1 o'clock. So I look forward to seeing you all then, but please don't hesitate to contact me if you've got any questions. Can I ask Andrew, Keris and Tom to stay online just for a little bit longer? But as far as the research module's concerned, thank you very much for your attention, and I will look forward to catching up with you on the 21st.